This gospel is a highly complex story, and there's no way around it but to take a little time and unpack it. Now relax, this is not going to be 20 minutes, okay? But we need to understand quite a bit of what's going on in this story. Ultimately, it's about those who think they see are really blind as bats, and those who are blind are now able to see. It reminds us, I hope, of us sitting here in this church. In this story, we have a lot of titles that are getting thrown around. We have the Christ, we have the Son of Man, we have other things. And it's important for you to remember, as I've told you before, that the Son of Man title had specific ideas that were in the minds of most people at the time of Jesus. Jesus redefines the Son of Man, but people do not accept his definition. So what's going on here? Jesus also decides to take a stream of concept from the prophet Isaiah and apply it to himself. That stream is about the servant. And Isaiah in chapter 52 talks about the servant who suffers. And this suffering theme will come up again in the gospel. In Isaiah 52, it was our infirmities that he bore, our sufferings that he endured. He was pierced for our offenses, crushed for our sins. The Lord laid upon him the guilt of us all. So that servant idea of suffering comes into the teaching of Jesus and his definition of himself. Now the Son of Man, some of that comes out of the book of Daniel in chapter 7. And remember, all these people in this story today would have known that book of Daniel. Here's what Daniel chapter 7 says. As the visions during the night continued, I saw one like a Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven. That's going to be quoted by Jesus in his own trial. When he reached the Ancient One and was presented before him, he received dominion, glory, and kingship. Nations and peoples of every language serve him. Well, at the time of Jesus, Jewish people were oppressed by the Romans who had taken over their kingdom. And they saw this as a sign of hope. We are going to get our kingdom back. We're going to kick out the Romans. The Son of Man, this hero guy, is going to help us get rid of the Romans and get a Son of David back on the throne of our kingdom. Highly political. They took this spiritual concept and turned it into a political one. This is the concept in the minds of most people at the time of Jesus. And it was ingrained in them from centuries before, when a lot of extra literature got written that never quite made it into the Bible for all kinds of reasons. One of these books that never got in the Bible is the book of Enoch. And I want to quote something from it for you. This is written roughly 100 to 300 years before Jesus. And in it, they have a particular image of the Son of Man. And this is filling people's imaginations at the time of Jesus. Here it is, Enoch. There I saw one who had a head of days, and his head was white like wool. And with him was another being whose countenance had the appearance of a man, and his face was full of graciousness. And I asked the angel who went with me and showed me all the hidden things concerning that Son of Man, who he was. And he answered and said to me, this is the Son of Man, who has righteousness, with whom dwells righteousness. And this Son of Man, whom you have seen, shall raise up the kings and the mighty from their seats and the strong from their thrones. And he shall loosen the reins of the strong and break the teeth of the sinners. Here's the political. And he shall put down the kings from their thrones and kingdoms. So, people at the time of Jesus thought, cool, he's going to put down Caesar. He's going to put down King Herod. That's what the Son of Man is going to do. All right, let's sign up. Let's get ready for the revolution. The Son of Man, you notice, in that scenario is glorious. Jesus redefines what will happen to the Son of Man. People don't accept it. This is what Jesus said. Mark chapter 8. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected and be killed and rise after 3 days. Well, he told them, but it went in one ear and out the other. They're sure he's wrong. Again, this is in Matthew 16. Jesus went into the region of Caesarea Philippi and asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" See, Son of Man, me, pulling it together. Simon Peter said, "You are the Messiah," another title. "The Son of the living God," another title. They still think Jesus doesn't have it figured out, and they do. Remember now, they're thinking the Messiah is somebody different from the Son of Man, who's somebody different from the Son of David, but they're getting all conflated now. And they don't like the route Jesus is taking because he says the Son of Man must suffer. And they keep thinking, no, the Son of Man must be glorious. Okay. All this comes together in the trial of Jesus when titles are getting thrown all over the place. Even over the cross, there's a title, King of the Jews. This is Matthew 26. The high priest said to him, "I order you to tell us under oath before the living God whether you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Now, Peter said he was. Peter forgets about this, but he said it. Jesus said to the high priest in reply, "You have said so, but I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven." It's right out of Enoch. And the high priest understands exactly what Jesus just said. This is a claim to divinity. That is why the high priest does what? Do you remember in the trial? Tears his garments. He has blasphemed. The blasphemy is Jesus is saying he's divine. The high priest understood very well. He made the wrong choice, but he understood. And then allowed terrible things to happen and even manipulated terrible things. This blind man that we hear about today is the one who gradually comes to see who Jesus is. And we know that because toward the end of the story it says he worshiped him. You don't worship prophets. You worship God. The blind. The blind man began to see very clearly. And it's fascinating, isn't it, that while the religious experts are getting more and more blind, they thought they saw, but they didn't. The blind man who couldn't see at all now sees the most clearly. The two stories parallel each other and cross over each other. This is a fantastic story. And it tells us what? At this point, I want to ask you, so what? Now that you know all this, so what? Well, so what do you understand about who you see in Jesus? I know a lot of people who are quite willing to claim Jesus is one of the great spiritual teachers. It stops there. And I want to say, well, isn't that special? There are a lot of great spiritual teachers. They don't want to go any farther. What about you and me? Have we come to see who Jesus really is? The high priest understood the claim and rejected it. The blind man came to see and accepted it. Every one of us in this church, do we come to see? It's a process. Thank God we've been given the gift of faith, and we work at it. And sometimes, just out of faith, we have to say, I believe, because lots of things are telling us not to, and you don't feel like it, but you keep saying it. We have come to see. That's a great grace. Now, can you help others? Can you help others, like the blind man, come to see? Good question for this Sunday.